Hey everybody, I am back with a couple more movies that you can watch during your time of isolation or quarantine, or maybe you're just bored and you want to watch something new. I've got a couple new movies. I do have a couple notes here, so hopefully I won't have to look at them too much, but I might have to look at them a little bit. Alright, so my first movie is on Shudder again. Once again, I will try to mix it up so it's not all on one service. I know a lot of people don't have Shudder, but if you do have Shudder, there's a lot of good stuff on there, and it is also a pretty cheap service, so it is worth checking out. Recently added was a 2015 movie called Tales of Halloween on Shudder. Tales of Halloween, as you might guess, is a compilation of a whole bunch of short stories, short movie clips, you know, kind of more in the style of Creep Show, which of course is kind of considered kind of one of the best, if not the best, of those kind of movies. Although in recent years, probably the classic version would be Trick or Treat. If you haven't seen Trick or Treat, that is an excellent movie. This movie's decent, definitely a lot of fun. A good thing about this is that each story is short. There are lots. Most of these kind of movies will have 4 or 5 different stories. This one has probably about 8 or 9, so it moves very fast. Nothing sticks around too long. If you're not loving one, it's not going to be around more than maybe 10 minutes at the most. I mean, the whole thing's only, I think, 90 minutes or maybe an hour and 40 minutes at the most, so it doesn't overstay its welcome. None of the stories do. And definitely there are varying degrees of success in them, but I would say overall the quality is pretty decent. They all look good. They have a lot of practical effects, which is very much appreciated. And I think that if you're a fan of horror, and especially if you're a fan of horror anthologies, more of the Creep Show style, not super hardcore, not super intense, but more fun, then you would probably like this. You get Adrienne Barbeau doing kind of her reprise of the radio host, kind of like she did in The Fog. You do have a few other notable people popping up in this movie. John Landis, I think, at one point shows up as an actor in this movie. Lucky McGee, I believe, directs one of the pieces. You know, I'm not going to go through all the different shorts. You kind of have to watch them. I'll say my favorite, probably, though, is one where a little kind of a stop-motion claymation alien comes down. He's about this big, and he kind of comes down in the middle of a final girl showdown between a Jason-like character and, of course, the screaming co-ed. And it's very practical, it's very gory, but in a very Evil Dead homage, I would say. So it's very fun. That one, it was a personal favorite of that group. I would say overall probably about 3.5 stars, above average. If you're a horror fan, I think you'll find some fun in there. It's definitely some kind of thing you put on now and have some light, not so scary, but you know, horror fun in this period. It's a good watch. And then the next one I have just popped up on Netflix in the last day or so, and it's from 2019. I'm guessing it probably only got a limited release or maybe the festival circuit release. It looks like it's a pretty independent movie. It's called The Ghost Who Walks. Interestingly, I went and did a search on this. I didn't do a lot of research, but I did a little search on this. And when you do The Ghost That Walks, you get a lot of the old... If you're hearing bells, it's our dog. She wants to come out and go crazy, but I'm not going to let her. You get a lot of results of the old Phantom comic book character. This is not what this movie is about at all, but I think that might be what they would call the Phantom, who was in the old 40s, I think mostly the 40s and 30s serial. I think they did a version of it in the 90s that was pretty terrible. But this movie is nothing like that. This is more of a throwback, gritty, kind of, it's not a revenge tale exactly, but sort of one of those guy that's down on his luck, trying to survive. It almost seems like if it had been made in the early 70s, it would have been a blaxploitation movie or a kind of a Shaft sort of style movie. It has little elements that kind of give you a feel also of sort of things like Death Wish or that kind of thing, but not as I would say distasteful as something like Death Wish, because your main character is not necessarily a bad person. Anyway, I'll give you the basic rundown of the idea of it. First of all, I want to give a shout out to the main actor in this. He plays Nolan, and his name is Garland Scott. I've never seen Garland Scott before, but he is solid in this movie. He's good in the action scenes. There's not a lot of action scenes, but there are definitely some tense, physical scenes. And he's good in the emotional scenes. He's got a real charisma, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see more of Garland Scott. I kind of looked at his IMDb, and I didn't see that he's done a bunch. So I would say keep your eyes open for this guy. I liked him quite a bit. He was a good choice. Anyway, the movie starts with Nolan. He's getting out of prison, and as he's walking out to get let out, he's walking past all the other inmates, and they're calling him a snitch, and they're gonna get you, and blah 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 blah. And as he's going out and getting his clothes and getting ready to be driven out of the prison, you see some sort of ex-cronies of his that look like they kind of have mob or some kind of organized crime connections, and they look like they're basically out to get him. And they kind of indicate that his days are numbered. They also quickly show that he's supposed to be going into witness protection. That gets knocked down pretty fast. The rest of the movie essentially is him trying to reconnect with his estranged wife or girlfriend and a daughter that he basically has never met, and now is probably, I would say, about 8 or 9, and she was just a baby when he went into the prison. They never get into a whole lot of detail about his past, but you definitely get the feel that he was, going with the bad people. He was rolling with some bad guys, but he's not super evil on his own side. So when you see him act in this movie, his character act in this movie, usually if he acts in a violent way, it's out of necessity and not out of cruelty. So you can root for him. I would say it's definitely a cut above your average kind of underworld, guy trying to survive kind of movie, revenge kind of movie. It's not really revenge, but kind of that sort of movie. It is a cut above. The first half I was thinking, it's just kind of okay, but there's a point about in the middle where it slows down and he meets up with 3 or 4 different characters, and there are some real quiet, interesting moments there that could have been way more cliched than they were. Although they do have cliched aspects to them, the acting is strong and the moments are allowed to breathe and to open up in a way that this movie didn't have to do, and it gives it a lot more impact than I expected, emotional impact and character building than I expected. So I really was surprised in that aspect. And it ends pretty strong as well. It ends in a way that I wasn't expecting, quieter than I expected. That's not to say there isn't, some moments of violence and some blow-ups that happen in this movie, but not near as stereotypical as you could expect for a movie like this. So if you kind of like kind of gritty crime-based movies, but with a little more character-driven indies feel to them, you could do a lot worse than this movie. The Ghost That Walks, and that is on Netflix. I'd say, once again, about a 3.5 stars. Some people might even like it more than that. I mean, if this is kind of your genre, you might really dig this movie. I definitely thought it was good, and it got better as it went, which is surprising for a movie like this. Usually it's going to just go to straight up action by the end and kind of go downhill, but it was the reverse. It got better and less actiony as it went, and the action that it did have towards the end was more impactful because you got to know the characters a little better. Anyway, hope that gives you a couple things you might check out, and we'll have some more for you soon. Bye.